Everybody, welcome. As you know, Monday, 6:30 here, Tropical Nomad in Canggu, and we're coming to you live from Bali. You know, everyone watching us from other places in the world. Tonight we have a beautiful guest, Janet Hogan, who I'm about to introduce. Janet, welcome to the show.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to be here, Rob. It's an absolute pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome, my darling. So those of you who are watching for the first time, SpeakuP Monday is an award-winning, deep dive, open format Q&A. So that means that nothing's rehearsed, nothing is really, like set out in stone as we're going to do this, and this. That doesn't exist. And, for those of you who perhaps haven't been to Bali in some time, so Bali has changed. Last 6 months or so, last couple of years, due to COVID, this mass tourism model is no longer here. So what we have is this new style of tourism that I love to call contribution tourism. So contribution tourism, and it's about how do we, contribute to the life and the people and the resources on the island of Bali. And this is going to be mimicked everywhere around the world. So I'm a tourism architect, what we know as a tourism architect. So I work with tourism boards, I work with tourism-related businesses to create unique online business solutions, right? So that's what I do. In other words, I love telling people how good Bali is and creating this stream of inbound tourism, digital nomads, remote workers, health, medical, tech tourism. And tech tourism are things like blockchain, incubators, startups, accelerators, all the rest of that. And so we really do have this amazing, extraordinary opportunity to bring some incredible things here to contribute, not to take away from this beautiful place, island that we call Bali. And for those of you wondering, this is, I think, episode number 206 from memory. 206 episodes. It's been
amazing.
I know. And like the other part of this is that for those people maybe looking to move to Bali, these episodes, which is in a YouTube library, give you the opportunity to look at what life is actually like, which people are here. Actually, it's not a media report, it's not a branded, organization trying to spoon feed you stuff that they believe is in your better interests. It's a real deep dive account of the wonderful people, from captains of business of huge companies to spiritual leaders, entrepreneurs, in all those other areas I mentioned before, this education tech, this climate tech, and we've actually had, Janur Madayasa, who's Plastic Exchange Bali, who we had on when he was just starting this incredible initiative for exchanging plastic for rice. Is in the, I think he won the award, CNN Local Hero Award, and it's so he's in the US at the moment, and our second interview just saw how this thing rose meteorically. And this is what Bali does. It has this incredible knack of bringing some extraordinary people together who create, incubate, accelerate some amazing ideas which can then be adopted by the rest of the world. So it's wonderful. But look, let's shift gears to you, Janet Hogan, and I just want to say that it's a pleasure because, we met here in Bali some years ago, and in the back of my mind, and I think it was Chris Robb, our good mutual friend, was saying, Rob, you should have Janet on the show. And I was like, you know what, Chris? You're right, mate. You're right. And finally, we managed to do it. And, as we're going to get into you in a minute, what I love about you is that you have this, and we had a quick chat before, this, the work that you do is, allowing people to see, what they're really supposed to be doing, their purpose in life. And then as you clarified, in our little chat before, it's more than that. It's more about, which people do you serve? And when you can get clear on that, then through these pain points of your life is where your purpose is uniquely interwoven And in such a way, you can have this extraordinary impact of, not only clearing your slate, but the slate of those gone by and the slate of those to come. So it's amazing what you do.
Beautifully articulated, I tell you what. This guy's a genius for reinterpreting and repackaging what someone does. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Oh,
yeah.
wonderful. And you know what? So what brought you to this work? Which, if you look back over your life, which kind of maybe milestones or rhythms or patterns were emerging in your life that led you towards what you're doing now?
Yeah. It's so interesting because when I look back, it's almost like everything seemed preordained. Of course, at the time when you're in the middle of the drama, it's quite the opposite. It's a woe is me tale, which I think everyone has that moment. So I actually had a very blessed life. I didn't go through any major trauma, but I was more of a human doing than a human being. I really bought into that mantra of the harder I work, the more money I make, the happier I'll be. And that was very much the mantra in the 80s as well. And so I followed that to a T, and my husband and I together ran a whole string of businesses, so including running a restaurant, setting up an advertising agency in Sydney, running that for many years, very successful. Then going into real estate, creating a suburb in the beautiful Whitsundays, which is like Australia's answer to the Caribbean. Yeah, you know it. And then setting up a wedding business in Australia and Bali. So all of that to say, this isn't some kind of brag list, quite the opposite. It's just to say that if you looked at my life, and maybe if you're listening to this, you look at your life, rather than being this straight highway to success, it's more like this zigzag of, wow, what do I do next? What do I do next? But none of the decisions are informed by a knowledge of the self. They're formed by opportunity. And opportunity is very, very dangerous because it's expedient. You do it because you can, not because there's any sense of inner calling. And so at some point, you have to pay the piper. And so I got to this point where I had everything I thought I wanted. I had the luxurious multi-million-dollar mansion on the waterfront, private beach next door, 3 beautiful daughters, stable marriage, what more could you want? And I'll never forget that day just looking around at everything that we owned and going, oh my God, why do I feel so empty? What's that about? And this sense of, I've spent all my life climbing this mountain to reach the top, and the view from here really sucks. And not doing anything about it, because what do you do with that feeling? You can't jump off the proverbial mountain. So I just kept doing more of the same. And then a year later, because I didn't take action, the universe took it for me and delivered the 2008 global financial crisis. So over the space of 12 months, I watched as everything that we'd worked so hard for disappeared. And because that was my whole sense of self-worth was tied up in our net worth, as the money disappeared, so did I, my whole sense of self, until it got to the point where I heard about this German billionaire who dealt with his loss by throwing himself in front of a train. And instead of feeling compassion or sympathy or empathy for him, I just was obsessed by this one thought, if only that was me. If I could check out at this point, the world would be a better place. And so, and I think, if you reach that ground zero point where you really just can't see a light anymore, it's just darkness ahead, death is inevitable. It's what type of death do you choose? Do you literally, check out physically and then you leave all your suffering behind for your friends and family to deal with, or do you die some kind of metaphysical death? You let go of a long-held belief, and that's, I had no choice. I had to let go of that belief that money was the key to happiness, which then brought the next question, well, if money isn't the key to happiness, what the hell is?
Wow. What a great story. And there's lots to grab onto. The thing that comes up is that, as some of you know already, one of the 3 most important reasons why SpeakuP Monday started, and on a Monday, was due to suicide. And many of you have heard this before, but working at a really high level in the Sydney hospitality scene and doing very well. Had 3 friends, which they weren't my best friends, but they were people who I thought I knew pretty well. And over the course of a year, and they looked good, smelled good, had the house, had the car, had all of those trappings that you mentioned, you know, all of those wonderful things. But over a year, each one of them took their own lives physically in this world, not metaphysically. And you know, when we were at Life in Bali, which is a cafe that myself and my beautiful girl Marina set up with our kids in Tamora Gallery, just not far from here. And Monday night, we were wondering, you know, how can we create community? And, you know, we came up through a friend called Morton who said, you know, you're a speaker, right? I said, yeah. He goes, well, shouldn't you be doing speakers here? I was like, that's a good idea. And then I thought, okay. And then I realized that when I did research about suicides, Monday was the day, like 70, 80% most likely where people would take their lives, or at least attempt to. Yeah. So then it became one of saying, well, how can we then rewrite that script and create this wave of positivity and inspiration on a day where there's desperation, right? And then that's really how Speak Up Monday. There was 3 reasons, but that was the main one, and that's why Speak Up Monday came into existence, and that was over 3 years ago. 206 episodes every single week. We haven't stopped, right? Giving inspiration, and that's what we won the award for. But it's, but you know, you left us right there. You know, you led us through your career, through this thing that the world tells us is this is how life is supposed to be, right? Yeah. You got to have the house, you got to have the car, you got to have the dog, the cat, the wife, the kids, and
all the trappings.
All of those things. You got to. You are now successful. You can retire, be happy. You've made it, right? Yeah. And then you mentioned, you know, and I've met quite a few people in the same place. By the way, I've met people who have all those things who are really happy too. So it's not just to say that if you have that, you have to be unhappy. But I've met a lot who weren't. And as you mentioned, you know, before comes that defining moment of, you know, that realization. And a lot of these guys that I met were, you know, they used drugs as that way to, you know, stave off the inevitable, that inevitable question of, hey, what's going on? It's like I keep pushing it away, drugs, sex, rock and roll, all of that stuff, and it didn't work, right? So then you've brought us to that place. So then what happened to you? Like what did you do when you realized you had this realization that, you know, one way something's got to die? Yeah.
So when you get to that point, I think when you're ready, because after that I had PTSD for, you know, of quite a few months. So my synapses weren't firing. You know, I sit in the office and read an email but couldn't actually respond to the email. And so that's pretty scary when you lose that very basic mental capacity. But after slowly getting over that, there's a point, I think, where something kicks in. If there's a little spark, it only requires a little spark of something that says, okay, what's the answer? And so it's the search. We go on the search, you know. So I guess it really speaks to the hero's journey. We leave the ordinary world. And it's interesting you talked about Monday, because I'm a bit of a word nerd, and I was thinking, oh yeah, Monday, that used to be Moon Day, right? And the moon represents our shadow. And so we have to start confronting our demons, confronting our shadow, and maybe that's why it's a lot of people drown in that space. But that I didn't know that that's what I had to do. All I knew was that I had to start exploring what was beneath the numbness of my existence, you know, this life half lived where I was just on autopilot all the time. And so that's what I went in search of the answers, and I just became not a seminar junkie, but I was very open to signing up for anything. And what really frustrated me and actually made me angry was people taking a lot of money to impart their particular lesson, the course they wanted to teach, which would lead to another course and another course and another course. But no one really tried to answer that fundamental question of who am I and why am I here? Which to me just feel like the most important questions that we have to get to the bottom of. And so thankfully I'd spent that 20 years in advertising, which had taught me the importance of strategizing and coming up with an outcome and, you know, pursuing something. And so I went, okay, well, if no one else can throw me this rope ladder that I need when I'm at the bottom of my dark pit, maybe I can create it for myself, and that's what I did. And so it was really self-discovery, self-knowledge 101 called The Fifth Door. And I started teaching this to students because I thought if there's any stage of our life where we need to know who we are, surely it's just when we're on the verge of making all these life-changing decisions at around 17 or 18. So I started teaching it to those kids so they could start to know who they were.
And one of the things, I mean, that's a great segue, you know, who are we? Why are we here? That question that I think deep down we all sort of have, right? Whether we want to admit it to ourselves or not. So, you know, maybe good timing, you know, what is that you teach, that fifth door? You know, give us a little bit more body to it. And and like what it feels like for you as well. Yeah. Taking people through it.
So I think the catalyst for transformation is going, okay, where am I now? You know, before you go on a journey, you know, if you're filling in your plane ticket, which I'm sure we'll get to do one day again, doing your online booking form, you know, the first question they ask is where are you departing from? And so we have to know that. So I use the model of the 5 doors to help people get clear on, well, where are you at in your life? So just imagine that there are 5 doors. And door 1 we call living hell. So that's whatever your definition of that is. And this is the door that no one wants to confront, of course. But the problem is, if we don't confront door 1, it tends to pursue us. So we're far better opening it up and taking a peek inside. So that's whatever that worst-case scenario is. It's different for all of us. Then door 2 is the treadmill. So this is the life of mediocrity, the life of compliance, where we just follow the programming. And in the Western culture, it might be doing a 9-to-5 job, you know. Then, fortunately, there are 3 more doors. Door 3 is the roller coaster. So that's where you break away and you go, yeah, I'm going to write my own story, but instead of being this smooth highway to success, it's more like a roller coaster where there tend to be more downs than ups. And then door 4, called Pipe Dream, is really interesting. And I was very lucky to get to this door, which is where you get everything that you thought you wanted, only to realise it's not it. Yeah, and there's no sequence about this. Like I went straight from door 4 to door 1, you know, and stayed there for a while. So that's where most of us are stuck, behind one of those 4 doors at any point in time. The invitation is to cross the threshold to a whole different paradigm that is not taught to us in schools and not taught to us in our, you know, traditional education platforms. But comes from our intuitive self or our higher self, the expression of our higher self. So what does that look like? So it looks like 3 things, the convergence of 3 things. One is really following what your heart dictates, so what you feel most deeply about. Combining that with whatever the gift is that you've been given, whatever you have a natural aptitude for. Like you have an amazing aptitude for connecting with people, and you know you have this gift that's just glowing in every pore of you, and then applying those 2 things, what you're passionate about and what you're gifted at, to solving a problem for others. So adding value to the world. And when we do that, when we can score that holy trifecta, if you like, that's what I call the sweet spot. We're essentially living in a constant state of prosperity, and by that I mean we're living in exchange, we're giving and receiving. It's this beautiful loop that we find ourselves in.
You reminded me, we've mentioned before, Mare Janor Yasa, this one's for you. You know, he has this with the plastic exchange, it's a takwamasi. The giver becomes the receiver and the receiver becomes the giver. Yeah. You know, that's in a way what I'm hearing. That's beautiful. And that, you know, because you mentioned earlier on about, you know, for most people, you know, the key to that 5th door is acknowledging the challenges and struggles that you face. So can you tell us a little bit about that? I think it comes in there. Yeah,
what's really fascinating about this is, so where I took this, I started teaching the kids, and I'd write their school reports for them, and the parents would read the reports and go, oh, I'd like a bit of that. So I started teaching the parents and giving them, and from that they would get clarity about these 3 elements. But then I hit my biggest stumbling block, and something I didn't expect, that I thought they just needed the intellectual clarity. But the problem was, which I can really boil down to one word, was inaction. they didn't do anything with it. And I thought, well, what's the point of taking people on this journey if I'm only going to falsely raise their hopes? You know, that's worse than doing nothing at all. And then I went, okay, what if we could crack the code for inaction? Where does that come from? Because there was something that was stopping them accepting that they had a gift and accepting that they were here to actually share it with the world. And I thought, what's that about? And so that's where I set about reverse engineering in action.
Ooh, reverse engineering in action. You've got to tell us now.
Yeah, inaction being the outcome that we don't want. So inaction has many fathers or mothers. Self-doubt, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, need to control, distraction. These all lead to inaction, a feeling of stuckness where we just don't know where to go next, a feeling of overwhelm, like we've hit a ceiling of complexity. And so I thought, what do these all have in common? And of course, they're all different forms of fear showing up. And so, okay, so where does the fear come from? Because we don't live in an age where there is a tiger waiting behind a bush about to eat us, and yet we act all the time as if there is. What's that about? So it's like we've been over-primed for a fight or flight or freeze response. Where does that come from? Where does that over-priming originate? And so that led me going right back to the origin, to the childhood wound and the trauma. And what I realised was I thought trauma only happened to people who had a very abusive past. But there are a couple of types. There's a capital T trauma, and that indeed is that. And then there's a little t trauma, and all of us have some form of trauma, whether it's the little t trauma or the capital T trauma. It's almost as if that's absolutely an essential part of our voyage as humans on this planet. In other words, to say, well, I wasn't traumatized, you're actually denying yourself the greatest gift that you've been given. Because that childhood wound that contains the pain is the source of our future passion if we choose to transmute that pain. So, but what I realised was that trauma is what creates the disabling emotion, which is shame. And shame creates the peace that I was looking for, the Rosetta Stone. And so, you know how we talk about limiting beliefs? Yeah, well, the realisation for me was that, yes, we all have limiting beliefs, 101 reasons why we're not good enough. But there's one that sits at the base of all of them that's the creator of all those limiting beliefs, what I call a core destructive belief. And if we can find out what that is, then we unearth this thing that's been keeping us stuck.
Goose pimples.
I know, that's how I felt too. I went, yes, yes.
That feels remarkable. So these core destructive beliefs, give us an example of some of them.
Yeah. I'll share a story of someone that I worked with recently. So a lovely fellow from Canada ran a real estate agency. His problem wasn't in his career so much as his personal relationships. He said, Janet, I know the work that you do and I want to talk to you. I'd like to work with you because whoever I'm in a relationship with accuses me of not being able to commit. And I went, oh, okay, yeah, commitment phobia. I've heard that before. A lot of guys get accused of that. All right, so let's find out what's causing that. And so what we do, like two detectives, we have a dig. We go for a dig. And it didn't take long before what came to the surface for this fellow was that his trauma, which is really a capital T trauma, was the breakup of his parents when he was 8 years old. And like so many kids in this situation, and it was exacerbated by the fact that he was an only child, he had to choose between his parents, right? Do I stay with dad or do I go with mum? And you can imagine the burden that places on a young child. And so anyway, he ended up being with his mum. And in another exercise, I asked him to draw his greatest fear. I said, what's the thing that scares you most? And do you know what he drew? He didn't draw a picture of someone or an animal or a dragon or anything. He drew a piece of paper and there was a tear right down the centre of the paper. So when we finally got to the part where we do what's your core destructive belief, and we work with a list of about 200, but quite often the one that it is not on the list. It always starts with I'm not good enough, but what we want to find is I'm not good enough because, and we were going through a whole process of elimination, and finally I said, you know what, could it be I'm not good enough because I'm torn? And so there was that silence. That's when you know something's happened. Yeah. And he said, yeah, that's it. And I said, can you see now how that story running you, that programming, will stop you ever getting into a committed relationship? How can you, when you, the essence of you, who you think you are, your identity is, I am torn. Yeah, so in bringing that to light, it's almost like the minute you apply oxygen to a toxic story, the toxicity goes, and the story is just a fable. Yeah. So the end of that story was the next week he came and saw me, and he said, guess what? I said, what? He said, I've broken up with my girlfriend. And I said, oh, tell me about that. He said, well, I explained the process that we'd been through and this belief that I'd been running with, and I realised to his girlfriend, he said, the reason I stayed in the relationship was to prove to myself and to you that I could commit. But it wasn't coming from love. It was coming from my ego, basically, that I had to prove that I could commit. And so the moment I could unbundle that, I could see that you and I are not supposed to be together. And she said, I love you, and I totally agree, and thank you for freeing me. And he said to me, the most wonderful thing is that we're friends. There's no acrimony. We were able to part ways because we could see that the relationship was built on a false foundation. And I said, and do you think you could commit to someone? He said, absolutely. Now that I'm whole, I love myself. Yeah.
Wow. How did that make you feel?
I went, relief. Yeah, relief on his behalf. And the other thing too, when we're doing this work, we're not just healing others, we're healing ourselves. Every time we're healing ourselves. It's a form of what I call noble selfishness. And I think that's what keeps us in the game. Who wouldn't want to be constantly healed, and who wouldn't want to be giving that relief to others? That's what we're talking about, giving, receiving. That's really, it's not just financially, it's on all levels. Mm.
Is there a trap in there?
A trap?
Come on.
Oh, yeah. You could get into the space of I'm here to save the world. Yeah. So I think, and that is the space that a lot of us go to, because if the shame is speaking loud enough, if it's a sense of there's something wrong with me, then we want to prove to the world how righteous I am, right? So there's shame on one side and there's overblown pride on the other, and that's what I call the overcompensating self. Yeah, and that's what this fellow was doing. He was having to prove that he could commit, right? But that's an intellectual concept. It wasn't coming from his heart. Yeah, so if I started saying to myself, oh, aren't I great, helping all these people, becoming smug and self-righteous about it, that would be a real red flag.
Got it. Wow. Yeah. And so another one that popped in. So when you're in this space with somebody, where is Janet?
That's a lovely question. So Janet's usually talking to their shadow self. So we work with 3 personas. So there's right now I'm talking to your grown-up self, and then I'll talk to your shadow self. We're asking the shadow's permission, of course, because the shadow hasn't been acknowledged. So the shadow usually, I've never had a shadow say no, I don't want to play. The shadow feels relief for finally being acknowledged, and then we talk to the shadow's positive twin, yes. The overcompensating self. So I'm still there. I'm really just a bouncing board. Really, I'm just asking questions. Yeah.
And for you, is there a challenging part of this process for you personally that you found?
No. If I allow myself to be very present, I know the value of pain. My dad was a doctor, actually, and he was a surgeon. And I think, in a way, I've inherited some of his DNA. So what I do feels very surgical in terms of the work. You know, we do the deep dive. We make... No, I shouldn't say this because people will run a mile, but it's kind of like...
Tell the truth, it's okay.
We make the incision. We apply the anaesthetic. No, we don't. No anaesthetic. We really do go to bring something out, you know, it's almost like a tumour, but there's nothing actually inherently wrong with it, and we don't want to get rid of anything, but it's very intentional, the work, you know, it's very, very focused. So when I'm in that place of focus, I'm not really thinking about anything else. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. It's powerful what you do. And I mean, you mentioned something earlier on, which is shame, right? Mm. And a lot of people, I think all of us have got some degree of shame.
Yeah.
But how do you exorcise, if that's the correct word, how do you exorcise shame? How do you let shame go?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to recognize what it is. You know, shame can show up in our body in terms of physical symptoms. I know in myself, I feel it like hot flushes, and I used to think that was menopause, and then I went, oh no, that's how shame shows up in me.
Oh, it's menopause. No, it's shame. Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's right. In other words, it's, there. But
I have more time.
Yeah. Anything that we feel uncomfortable sharing or speaking about is often a symptom that there's shame behind that. And so really, quite simply, the antidote to that is to share it, to speak it. You know, when we hear, Brené Brown talking about to be vulnerable, I think vulnerability for me is sharing whatever is you feel ashamed of that you're not willing to share. And when you don't share it, it kind of festers and amplifies, and can show up as physical symptoms, you know, can make us sick. So, yeah, that's what you do. You bring it to the surface and share it. I often post on Facebook things where I go, okay, I'm getting out of my comfort zone right now. I'm just going to hit send or post, and the shame goes straight away.
So for those of you who may be joining us now, so Janet Hogan, wonderful, right? The fifth door, helping you to discover, you know, like not only what your purpose is, but who you really are, which I love. And you have this great modality, we wouldn't call it modality, this way of being, which is these 5 doors, and helping to get into the core of who you are, this core pain that's been hiding out for forever. And once you get to realize that, you get to let it go and realize, you know, I'm unlimited. And what I can do. So then from that space there, you know, does it then become apparent to the person that you're talking to or the person that you're with what they should be doing in their lives, or is that another step?
Yeah, totally, yeah. So that's the thing, what's really interesting, and this is why pain is such a gift, is not only when you exercise it, it's not about it then just goes away and life's rosy. No, you are there to feel the pain. Part of our purpose is to feel pain, which is ironic when you think how pain allergic we are as a society, you know. We have a headache, we take a tablet for that.
Pleasure.
Yeah, we get pain in a relationship, we run. Oh, there's a better person for me, you know, you suck, I'm going to find someone else and then I'll be happy. So we're terrified of pain. Yeah, and that's why I worry about how we're going as a race, because we're so adverse to it. But if we could just turn that around and go, no, pain is actually a sign that we are alive. It is informing us as to our purpose and why we're here. And so if we can go, okay, so I've experienced this pain. It's not so active in me anymore. In fact, I feel a beautiful sense of calm. However, I now recognise that there are other people who are experiencing a similar type of pain. And so this informs us as to who we're here to serve. And you know that's the trifecta, you know, the problem that we're here to solve, that really speaks to that. Yeah.
Such beautiful. It's beautiful the work you do, you know. And we had a friend on the show, Benjamin Castillo, if he's watching.
Oh, yeah.
You remember Ben?
Yeah, of course.
And a lot of his work is into this collective trauma that the human race is carrying around with itself for eons, right? Ever since time immemorial. And then how these survival instincts kick in based upon the threat that we're feeling at that time. And what this overzealousness of response to hide that survival instinct and that trauma, what that does and how that helps us to kind of spin off into space, right? And completely be off our mission.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Completely off our mission. So then if I said to you, the word mission, like what comes up for you?
Mission sounds kind of mock heroic, and it's just a stigma or a stain that word carries. And I think purpose, the same thing. These words almost become commoditized, and they lose their true meaning. Okay, so if we can just go back right to the true meaning of that word, or maybe it's like a sense of meaning. What gives our life meaning? What kind of justifies our waking up in the morning and wanting to get out of bed? What is that pulls us? That's not willpower or ego. What is that? Where we feel compelled to do work. That comes, I believe, from healing our pain. And recognizing we can totally empathize with others who are feeling the same pain. If we can zero in on those, and we only have to be a little further ahead in the path to help those people and guide them out of their pain, that feels very much like, to me, what our mission is. It's different for all of us. So I've known the pain of self-betrayal, not knowing my true path and veering off in all directions, running all these crazy businesses and then feeling empty. I know the pain of that. I also know the pain of being a mother with an estranged daughter, and that's another totally different pain. So these are two different audiences I speak to, and that pain is intense. It's probably more intense in a way, for women who have had the great blessing to have a child and then have that child not want to know you is something unfathomable. The pain of that is unfathomable because your head cannot make sense of it and your heart breaks. And so that's an intense pain. And because I feel that, it's not so active in me now, but it's definitely there, then I am drawn to help other women in the same situation. And so that's what I would call mission, to guide others out of their pain. Yeah. Mm.
And that pain, having two kids as well, 5 and 7, two little girls. So if someone maybe watching now is going through something maybe similar, or they're on the verge of this event or this series of actions that leads to an outcome, what advice could you give?
Yeah, okay. So when we don't know who we are, we tend to think the worst of ourselves. So when we haven't got to the base of our pain because we're running away from it, we tend to think there's something wrong with us. That's part of the programming. So it's just understanding that it's totally normal to feel that. And what we're talking about here is a confusion of identity. So in my work, I thought I was a worker, a career woman. That was my identity. So as soon as you took my business away, I freaked out. I remember when my husband said, let's move to Bali. And I said, what the hell am I going to do? That was terrifying, that thought. Alone with myself, but I don't know who I am, And so it's what's happening. It's like the dark night of the soul, as they say, or the darkness before the dawn, is we have a confusion as to who we are. We don't know. We've lost our sense of self. So whether your identity is as a mother, a father, in your business, it's a career title, whatever it is, that's not who you really are. So that's the overcompensating mask that we have to take off. And then we find out who we really are. Now, my fear, and the fear a lot of people have, is, but what if there's nothing behind the mask? What if I tear it off and I look in the mirror and there's the invisible man or the invisible woman? And I really thought that's what I would find, and that's why I was so resistant to doing this work. Or you might look in the mirror and not like who you see. Well, what I would say to someone confronting that issue is, in my experience working with hundreds of people, that has never happened. When you take off the mask, you actually love who you see, probably for the first time. That's the big surprise. That's the relief.
And, there might be some people who are watching now saying, well, okay, I've done some of the work. Let's call it that for now. I've let some things go. I'm on the journey to getting to what those core destructive patterns or pains are, or that particular one. So one way they could do it is to come and see you. What's another way that they could do it? If they're by themselves, they don't want to see anyone, like, are there any, not tips, I don't want to nullify it like that, but are there any actions, that people could start to do to help them begin to discover who they really are?
Definitely. I think, first of all, to go, this is a journey. I think I'm the only person in the world feeling this way at the moment, and understanding that that's actually not true, that you have to feel this sense of isolation and loneliness in order to break through. It's almost like that is part of the hero's journey. And there are ways to... I'm very process driven. I'm very like, this is the way, you have to unearth this piece. I do believe that. But if you can't do that, then the other things that you could do are finding other ways to go deep within. I find hypnotherapy can be very effective as a process. If there's a particular trauma that you want to process, EMDR, eye movement desensitizing reprogramming, is another great way of processing a particular trauma that might be stuck. Journaling, writing about it. I think therapy can help, but it helps, cognitive behavioural therapy helps you intellectualise things and revisit. I don't believe it necessarily gets to the root cause of the problem, but I think anything like that is probably positive. I'm not a big fan of wallowing. I'm not a big fan of wallowing at all. So my whole thing is, I really feel that we have to do this work and do it fairly methodically and fast. I actually teach in groups as well. There's a lot of healing when you're sharing this experience with others, and to do it fairly quickly. I don't believe that you have to spend months or years in this space at all. And besides, we need more people in the contribution space, so we don't want to be spending months or years either.
Yeah. So then when it comes to that great word, empathy.
Yeah.
So what comes up for you when I say empathy?
Empathy is when you feel someone else's pain without necessarily having walked in their shoes. You can connect with them on an emotional level. Yeah. And without judgment. It's not like sympathy, which is like, they're there, you'll be okay. It's a heart connection, empathy. I think you have to have confronted your own pain to feel truly empathetic. So probably, if I speak personally, it's only something I've been able to be in recent years. Most of my life I've been in an unempathetic, numbed out space. I've been a very unconscious mother, a very unconscious wife, and a very unconscious career woman. So it doesn't surprise me at all that my journey led me to where it did. But that was my journey. And now, confronting the pain, I think, creates the pathway to empathy.
So why don't people listen? So, in your story, there's patterns there that you've established, and you can see, well, that was the point, that wasn't that, there's another one, didn't listen then, definitely didn't listen then, and still not listening, right? So maybe there's some people watching now, who kind of know what I'm talking about, right? And say, well, yeah, I'm kind of moving this thing away, I'm not really looking at it, I pretend I am, but I'm not really, so why do people avoid this stuff? Like, what?
Because they're not in enough pain. Their pain level might be, 3 or 4 out of 10, and it's just not enough to motivate them. And they go, I'll do that some other day. So we tend to be, as a species, not great at planning ahead. We tend to be motivated by the fire next door, 1 minute to midnight. Then we're superhuman. We can do anything. So I tend to work with people who are very motivated, and just absolutely sick of where they're at. And they go, I'm done with this. And I guess they know enough about my work to know that actually it's not that hard. It doesn't have to be that hard. I think they're drawn to the fact that it's not therapy. It's nothing like that. It's more of a process.
Like in this time now, we're obviously in this COVID time, where a lot of people are facing and feeling certain things, and maybe have the opportunity to be still, right? To be by themselves, and in a way, there's like a giant reset, kind of going on. But has there been anyone who, without mentioning names, obviously, that started your work but didn't finish, and then came back later and finished?
No, because I hold them accountable. No, you have to. It's you know what? I liken it to going to an amusement park, right? And there was a park in Sydney called Luna Park. You probably know it. Yeah. And life is like a day at Luna Park, and everyone wants to go on the merry-go-round, or if they're little kids, or the roller coaster, all the fun rides. But a day's not complete without going on the ghost train, right? But when you go on the ghost train, you have to complete the ride. You can't just do a half ride. You have to come out the other side. So when I had a near-death experience at a Face Your Fears boot camp, and I heard this voice say, "Oh, you've let everyone down," that was one of my wake-up calls. I made a pact with myself that if I could possibly help it, I wouldn't let anyone down. So there's this sense of, I've got to see everyone through. So it's not really an option, only half doing it. You can't. I couldn't leave someone on the ghost train.
Love it. So if you have any questions, by the way, we have another microphone, so just pop your hand up, and any question you may have, I'm sure Janet will be happy to answer it. So are you? Yep, cool. The microphone will be coming around soon. So another question for you, which comes in. So going back to your family, now, is there anything that you would have done differently?
That's a really hard question, because don't we all lie in bed at 3 a.m. going, if only I'd done that? And I did that as a mother for many years, with one of my daughters, because I mentioned I was an unconscious parent. I was so bitten by this need to overachieve. Back in the days when we had typewriters, so I was working in advertising. We had our agency, and I took my typewriter into the hospital for every one of my 2 children's births. So I was working while I was waiting to give birth, and working immediately after. Yeah. That's called being a workaholic. That's called trying to fill the void. Yeah? So you can use drugs, you can use alcohol, and you can use work, you can use food, you can use all sorts of things. So I used work. And so I think it would be very easy for me to say, I wish I'd been a more conscious mother. I wish I hadn't done that. But there's something about the journey that is beyond us, that's kind of, I do feel it's kind of divinely ordained in a way, that my daughters who might have suffered at the hands of that unconscious parenting, that's their journey, that's their suffering. And in a way, I have no right to deny them of their suffering, because to suffer is the human experience, and we all have to. So it's almost like I'd be interfering. That's why I don't really buy into the idea of a time machine, where you can go back and change the past. I don't think we can. No, I just have to come to a place of acceptance and peace with that.
And you spoke before, about how this process can not only clear the past, but can also clear the future. Yeah. So can you maybe explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So when we exhume our past and when we get to the root cause of the story, that's the fable that's keeping us so stuck, suddenly it's like, did you ever play that game Tetris? Yeah. You probably have to be a certain age, don't you, to know what we were even talking about. It was a Game Boy game. Anyway, it was like these blocks. And it was always magical when you got, one block and the whole wall collapsed. Yeah. So it's like when you extract that core destructive belief, all the things that you framed as bad in your life, you go, oh, it was all there for a reason. So everything starts to make sense. It's like you have cleaned the slate. So that's making peace with your past, and that's we talk about depression versus anxiety, and people talk about depression as being totally trapped by the past, by that festering wound that's never been healed. So when we allay that fear of the festering wound, we're no longer held captive by the past. Equally, the future seems to be not such a scary place. So we lose some of that anxiety around the future. And when we can resolve our past and our future, that's when we really, live in the present. We are present, in fact, at that point. So, that's really where we want to be. I call it a state of oneness, where we resolve the divided self. But we can't just intellectualize it. We can't, I don't feel, okay, this is my opinion, but I don't feel we can just meditate our way there. I actually think that it's our job to heal the wound. Yeah.
Love it. And again, we'll move on after this, but so people get an idea, maybe 4 or 5 of these core destructive beliefs.
Yeah.
Right? Can you let us know?
You want to hear some of the juicy ones?
Let's get juicy. That sounds wrong, I know, but you know what I'm saying. Let's get juicy.
It's funny, but there seems to be a little bit of a relationship between how successful someone is and how dark their core destructive belief is. So I've worked with some super successful people. And sometimes they'll be I call them verbal scars. They'll come from the mouths of their mother quite often. And so there was one fellow who's came from a Jewish family, and I don't know what the Yiddish was for this, but it translated into English as, "I'm not good enough because I'm a lump of shit." Yeah, and so that's what I would call a fairly dark one. Yeah. Another one, a fellow I worked with, a beautiful man who's a professional working in the States and just felt that his whole life had been a waste. And he had this idea that he didn't belong. And so his belief was, and as a little boy he used to think that he was a bit of an alien. So his core destructive belief was, I'm not good enough because I'm not of this world. In other words, I'm not from here, yeah. And actually, he was very much from here. What's another one? Oh, yeah, another one, I was working with this woman from Scotland, beautiful woman. Her parents were very critical, and she was a very intuitive person, and quite often these are the most sensitive people, right? And she had this thing that in a previous life, maybe she was some kind of sorceress. Anyway, her core destructive belief was, I'm the source of no good. In other words, everything I do will bring a bad outcome to others. So you can imagine how you would just not do anything. You would be totally stuck. So I can go on and on. there's
one more.
One of the ones that's very, very common, and I think maybe a lot of people stop at this, is I'm not enough. What I would say is, yes, that might be it, but there's probably, what you have to do is, if you think it's I'm not enough, you have to go, okay, why am I not enough? I'm not enough because, and if you can say, hand on heart, I'm not enough because I'm not enough, and there's a finality about it, then you know they're there. You know that you're there. But quite often, it's going to be a bit darker than that. It's going to be around, it's usually something, another person I worked with, who, again, highly successful person, whose mother was religious, so there was this inbuilt sense of I'm sinful in some way, and his was I'm not good enough because I'm too dark, and he could interpret that so many ways, to do with all sorts of things. Yeah.
I think this is phenomenally important because we said before, well, I actually didn't give you the number, but this situation has led to certain breakthroughs. One of those breakthroughs being that we don't have to be location dependent, we can be location independent, right? Which is this whole remote worker movement. And, a stat, and I'm still looking for it, the stat is, within 2035, so what's that, 15 years, under 15 years from now, half of the working population, which is estimated to be 4 billion people, 4 billion people, half of that, so 2 billion people will be working remotely. It's a huge number, right? Obviously, that's why we're here in Bali, right? Because we understand that it's a hub for remote working. But here's the thing. So I was what was I doing? I was moderating, let's get precise, moderating a room for a friend, Olumide, who's Digital Nomad Week. So Digital Nomad Week, I think 2,000-3,000 people. And one room was about how to future-proof yourself. And I was interviewing 4 well-known, well-established digital nomads or remote workers. And, that they had future-proofed themselves, and it was about, how do you do that? But where I like to go, because I like to go a bit deeper, right?
Yeah.
Is to say, well, okay, I get the strategies that you've used, and those strategies are fantastic, right? Wonderful. But you're sitting somewhere by yourself, because a lot of these guys, they don't even work in co-working spaces either. It's like they're at home and they're just faced with themselves. So I said to them, how do you face yourself? Because each day when you get up, it's a bit like Groundhog Day, right? How do you create your day in such a way that it empowers you, that it leaves you empowered, right? And also you don't fall down any of those
rabbit holes
or trapdoors.
Yeah.
Right? And so the work that you're doing alludes to that, because, again, and one of these guys, I'm not going to tell you his name, but to me, what I feel with him is that he's not happy. I didn't say that to him, and maybe we'll chat some other time, maybe we won't. But that's what I felt from him, and he's highly successful, but yeah, I just get that sense that there's something missing. And we spoke about the story, and there's a near-death experience that he had, and so on and so on and so on. But it's almost like if you lose sight of why you do what you do, where will you end up? I don't profess to know the answer, but it's a question, because, as you mentioned, you've been through this highly successful life of multiple career paths, which have been very successful, multi-millions of dollars, or it's that massive house next to the water, it looked good, smell good, right? And that was a definition of success, the trap in some ways.
Yeah.
Another way, which I feel is emerging with this digital nomad movement, could be, that, hey, right, I future-proofed myself. I've got this residual income coming in, whether I'm doing it or not.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
There was one guy, Davide. His name will come back, and he was a guy who studies the ancient cultures and the ancient religions. Fiorentino. There you go, that's his surname. And what he found was that when he studied all these ancient religions, or these ancient movements where religion came out of, he realized that this thing that we called enlightenment was the first stage out of 3 or 4 steps. It was the first stage. Yeah. Whereas the world looks at it as the place where I want to get to. And according to his research, and this guy spent many, he's a theologian of the highest order. Like he spent, and you realize that is the first step, but we get stuck upon it, and we get looped into it thinking that that's all there is. In the same way as for you, it was like, I've got the house, I've got the car, I've got the kids, I've got the white picket fence. Yeah. And then I'm putting words in the mouth of other remote workers. I'm not saying it's the truth, but it's like, I've future-proofed myself. Yeah. I've got this thing rolling. I can live anywhere, I can move anywhere, I can do anything, I can be anyone. But I don't know who I am. Yeah. Right? So it's each one in its own way is a little bit of a trap. I don't want to use that word too frequently, but in a way it's like that. Yeah. So explain those 3 different routes or potential outcomes. Where can your work or the work that you do be accessible to them? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So what we're doing when we define success according to how comfortable can I make myself, we're confining our potential to the physical realm. We're thinking in terms of 3 dimensions, according to our senses. Money is a physical product, even if it's cryptocurrency. So we're essentially limiting ourselves to a life that is eventually going to feel suffocating at some level if we're awake. So the invitation is to go, okay, You've sorted that out. You're set for life. You're going to have food on the table and a roof overhead and all of that, all the trappings from now till the end of your life. Great. The question is, what now? And if you can't answer that, then you have no choice but to find out the hard way. And sometimes for some people that's the journey. Either they don't want to know, or they wait like I waited till I had to have a total crash and literally want to just check out. It doesn't have to be that severe. It doesn't have to be that dramatic. You can start exploring and asking questions. And what I would say, the attractive thing about this is that there is only good to come from this. You see, the problem is why we feel it's so important to set ourselves up in the physical realm is we think that's all there is to us. We don't understand that our physical realm is created by the mental realm, our mental realm is created by the emotional realm, and the emotional realm is created by, woohoo, the spiritual realm. And we couldn't have even used that word a few years ago. You know, people would have run a mile. But now we can talk about that. And that's the frontier. You know, we talk about going to Mars. That's the external frontier. That's the physical realm. But the inner frontier is going into the equivalent of going to Mars, but going in within ourselves. And it's a lot more than a red, dusty rock.
And we're not done yet, but how can people contact you? If they've seen you now, there's probably people watching now saying, okay, so I get that she's had these varying experiences which were very successful, so she had that done. She got this little wake up from the universe, let's call it that for now, right? And okay, so she's got that, she's worked with all these different types of people, right? So how do I get in touch with you, and how do you work? Like, are you online, offline? Do you come see me? Do you come to Bali? You can do it anywhere. What's going on? How do you do it?
Well, this is a gift of COVID. You know, I mean, it's been miraculous to be able to do this work now online. I didn't have any choice. So Bali was interesting. This is where I think Bali is a fascinating place for people to come to, because once I thought, I live here, but I make a compromise because I can only work with the people who are located in Bali, right? That's a relatively small population. Now, someone like me, and in fact anyone in this space who's working online can work with anyone in the world, so that's what I do. I work primarily with people in America, Canada, Australia, and UK to a lesser extent because of the time zone difference.
Yeah, brutal.
Yeah, I know. But so in terms of contacting me, it's simply janet@janethogan.com. That's you can just email me. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on and I've got websites and things like that. janethogan.com. But in terms of how to work, so what's very interesting is when COVID hit, I was about to do a live workshop here in Bali, and we've got a beautiful venue in Cabo. And so I was about to do a workshop there. And then we went, oh no, we have to leave. It all seems to be hotting up. So we went to Australia for 2 weeks, I thought. And then I realised, no, it's going to be a bit longer than that. And so I just rang everyone and I said, look, I'm not going to be flying back to Bali. So we're going to do this online in the Zoom room, and we're going to do 10 people. And we're going to do it in 7 days. We're going to do this deep dive in 7 days. In 7 days, you're going to be at a place of oneness. And so that's what we did. And all the therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists that I talked to said you cannot do that in that space of time with that number of people on an online format. Wow. Yeah. So that was the breakthrough for me, to realise that that was actually possible. So now what I do, I stretch it out a little bit more, and we work with a group, small number of people online. So you work from the comfort of your home, and we just go through it step by step, hero's journey into the soul. And yeah, some people say it's actually fun, so they might be a bit masochistic.
You think?
No, but honestly, there's a we talk about loneliness and isolation. If you can connect with others in a place that you feel is safe, that's a container, and you start to feel what true connection is like, that feeling of relief then spreads out to every aspect of your life. And I think if more people knew that, they'd be lining up. But yeah, at this point in time, it's not for everyone, it's for the relative few. But my dream would be to see people not necessarily doing my program, but this work as something that everyone does. It's the rite of passage. It's the rite of passage that we haven't done in our physical world. We've lost the rite of passage, the ritualization, and this is really a way of bringing it back.
How do you know that you're ready?
To do the work? I think you just trust your inner knowing. There's a little spark. For me, I had this feeling of I'm being buried alive. That's what I felt, that I'm living a life, I'm like the Walking Dead. That's what I felt. I'm really ignoring something important here to the point where it's going to start making me really miserable and wonder about what life is all about. So I think you trust yourself, that you know that there's something in there, a feeling of I'm playing too small, and I don't know that I can live with myself much longer in this smaller version of who I am.
And when I say pure spirit, what comes up for you?
Pure spirit for me is the great force, which is loving energy. And it's within us. It's also outside of us. And then we have our soul, which is us. If you like, the spirit contained within us. Yeah. But pure spirit is really where we ultimately will connect with, and that goes beyond some form of enlightenment. That is what we talk about when we're talking beyond enlightenment. It's a whole new dimension.
And then what's left for you as Janet Hogan?
Keep doing what I'm doing. It's the first time in my life where I haven't gone, I'm wasting my life. Honestly, I did have a near-death experience last year. I thought I only had 6 months to live. And the difference between that one and the previous one was I would be okay with checking out because at least I'd helped someone. You know, I think you only have to help one person. I think that's enough. That's enough to get you over the threshold of getting into contribution. You know, you talk about that and getting into that reciprocity, the cycle of give and receive. We're not here to change the world. We're only here to change our world. And our world can be changed by changing the life of one person. Helping one person gets us out of our egoic self into the contribution space. So once you're there, I think generally, this might sound a bit brutal, it's okay to check out at any point from there. You know, if you got run over by a bus, it would be okay. At least you'd experience what it was like to get out of your own way, you know.
Something comes up, and look, we're going to draw this to a close pretty soon. It feels like the right place. But there's a lady who I was speaking to. Her name is Bonnie Ware, right? So Bonnie, B-R-O-N-N-I-E. So B-R-O-N-N-I-E. Ware, W-A-R-E, W-A-R-E. She is, I think she's now probably more writing, but she's a terminal care nurse. Or was. And what would happen is that, so people that were basically given, similar to you in a way, a certain amount of weeks to live, they would go to this terminal ward, and she would be, you know, one of the nurses there that would help them through to the next place, the next space, wherever you want to call that. Right. Many years. And she decided, I'm not sure if it was a conscious decision or it was something that was guided, to ask, once they had come to terms with the fact that they were going to pass on, move away, you know, transform, however you want to put it, then she would ask them one question, you know, which was like, is there anything that you regret that you wish you would have done, you know, or wish you would have been in your life? So it's called Regrets of the Dying. Okay, so Bonnie Ware, Regrets of the Dying. It's a whole course. It's a book she wrote. It's been made into a film. May have already been made into a film. Last time I spoke to her, she said it's been made into a film. This was a couple of years ago. And powerful. So she's got this list of the top 10, which I won't go into. I'll give you the top one. So this is over a number of years. So we're talking many, 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 many patients now, over a number of years. And she asked them what, if any, what was a regret, the biggest regret of their life. And the biggest regret of their life had nothing to do with money, had nothing to do with God, and none of these ideas that we possibly think would be the case. It was as simple as this. It was, you know, I wish that I would have lived the life that I wanted to live, not the life that other people wanted for me to live. So once more, I wish, number one, regret of the dying, I wish that I would have lived the life that I wanted to live, not the life that other people wanted me to live, right? Hit me like a ton of bricks when I first read it. I was like, whoa. So when I say that, when you hear that, like, what comes up for you?
The magic triangle. So I know that feeling of going, I know what I don't want, but I don't know what I do want. And that sucks, because that's like this terrible limbo where we find ourselves. So to help alleviate that situation, I created this process that I call the magic triangle. And what it is, it's basically about 200 things that your soul might yearn for. So it's not a bigger house or anything in the material world. It's actually what the real you wants. And because we don't know that, we can't just dream it up out of nowhere. So I believe we need prompters. And so that's what I do. It's presenting to people what is it that if you can tap into your heart self, what is it that you really, really feel that you need? There's a whole bunch of options, and then through a process of elimination, we bring it down to 3. It's really interesting what the triangle then has to tell you, because it'll tell you your path, what your mission is. In other words, how you achieve what you want to achieve, and it'll tell you what your vision is. In other words, what is ultimately your highest value. If someone says if I said to you, what's your highest value, you might go, I don't know, integrity? That sounds good. But is it coming from you, or are you just saying what you feel you ought to say? So this really, it's a tool for helping you gain access to what your intuitive, or if you like, your higher self knows that you need. And that's a good starting point. And then it's about, okay, how do I bring that into my life?
How could you bring or make this work more accessible to nomads or remote workers?
Well, it's all there online, actually. If you go to my website, janethogan.com, you can do that magic triangle quiz, I call it, and it's there. It's free. And then there's an invitation. I'm happy to do a reading for you of the triangle, what it actually means for you, and how you can bring that into your life. And people find it really powerful because they've never actually confronted. We've all done, dinky little goal setting exercises, right? I want to make $1 million a year, and I want to have a nice house and a good relationship, right? But we've never asked our souls.
Still doing it.
What does your soul want? How do you answer that? So this is getting to the true grit of who you are. And if you can satisfy this, you're not going to get to the end of your life and go, I wish I'd lived the life I was supposed to live, because you've done it.
I think it's so valuable and important because, again, 2 billion people working remotely by 2035. It's a huge number. And a lot of these people, again, we're here at Tropical Nomad with our brother from another mother, Brother Ichi, right? So here, you can get some kind of galvanizing. You can get people coming together, right? You have some kind of community. You can have these things moving. But a lot of these guys are working from home, right? And are working from apartments and da-da-da-da. So they don't really necessarily see anyone, and the nature of their work is like that. And that can easily become a self-defeating, not like a self-perpetuating circle, where all you're doing is you work by yourself, you see yourself, you get up, you go to sleep, you get up, you work, you get up, you go to sleep, and you get stuck in that loop of the carrot of how can I future-proof myself by having a residual income stream so I don't have to do anything and I can be anywhere in the world. Yeah.
It sounds like the emotional bunkerism, doesn't it?
Yeah, because you're in your own prison. Yeah, because it's you that carries around with you.
Yeah, and that's just a construct because it sounds like the prime motivator for someone like that is safety and keeping themselves safe, and they equate safety with walling yourself off from others. But interestingly, actually that expression walled off is the original meaning of hell, or hell, a Germanic word, meant walled off. So they're committing themselves to a not very pleasant future. Heaven, if you want to, heaven is about reconnection with the self, and when we reconnect with the self, we reconnect with others. Heaven can happen in this incarnation. We don't have to die to go to heaven. Heaven is here. We just have to know how to reconnect with ourselves, and that's open to everyone.
No, I love that. So look, if we have any questions, feel free. Otherwise, while we're thinking about, question. I felt like there was one. felt it in my soul.
Hi. I just want to go back to the overcompensating self. Was that what you called it? Yeah. Could you kind of explain that a little bit more?
Totally, yeah.
Everyone knows about the shadow self and everything, but I just feel like the ego can easily
play
out with that one.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because I was thinking as I was talking to Rob, I didn't really get into the overcompensating self. So just imagine that who you really are, your true self, follows a gravity point, and imagine you're a flying fox and you're hanging there and it requires no effort. That's the true self, because when you're in your true self, like sitting here talking to you requires no effort for me, right? It's effortless. Where it's hard work is where we go into the space of trying to be someone that we're not. So there's this sense of there's something wrong with me, this core destructive belief, whatever it is that's running me, I'm a lump of shit, or, I'm too dark. Let's use that as the example. I'm too dark. So it gives us this sense of, and I'm carrying this shame and it feels like a burden. It's like a ball and chain around our foot. So part of us, and this is like on a subconscious level, we're not even aware that this is happening, part of us wants to right that inner wrongness, but it's a case of two wrongs don't make a right, and so we try and swing the other way, as far on the other side of our true self, towards the overcompensating self. So even to use this example of this fellow I worked with whose core destructive belief was, I'm too dark, when I said to him, I was talking to the shadow's positive twin, I said, okay, hello, positive twin. So I'm talking to the positive twin. Tell us about you. Thanks for joining us. So, I've been working with the shadow, and the shadow came up with this core destructive belief. It's really interesting. The shadow was telling us that he believes that blah, blah is too dark. I'm not good enough because I'm too dark. So tell us about you. How do you show up in the world? And he said, I'm a beacon of light, right? And that's what this fellow was in real life. He was on stage being a permanent beacon of light, but and he was successful on one level, but on another level, his private world wasn't so happy. Like you said, that other person, you sense he wasn't that happy, because once again, we're just running away from a lie. When we run away from a lie, we do not find the truth. The truth lies in the center. So we're following another extreme. Another way of putting it is, one is informed by shame, and the other, equally opposite self, the other extremity, is informed by pride. They're both egoic positions. It's just that one feels holier than the other. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, that was powerful.
Yeah. Any secondary supplementary question? Feel free. Don't hold back, brother. It's okay, man. I think you've got another one. Any more clarity, please?
Sorry, there was one. I've just got to think again. Give me a minute.
Yeah. So the overcompensating self can show up in all sorts of ways, we see it a bit in Bali, particularly around Ubud, for instance. It might be savior syndrome, someone who feels they're here to save the world, or it might be someone who's really all about hyperachievement. I have to prove that I can do this. When there's any sense of over-striving or overachieving or doing something to prove yourself worthy for the benefit of others, you know that you're not coming from the true self. The true self is just happy to just show up and, do its thing. It's not worried about being judged or criticised.
So this is where I said I'd probably get confused with the ego thing. So how do you distinguish between that and, say, if your highest calling was to serve others or be one of these, say, beacons of light, to someone that's actually, just by being, you are showing up and you are helping people? How do you distinguish between that type of true calling, and the false
Yeah.
positive twin, which is, like you said, the overcompensating self?
It's probably how present you feel at the time. So you're not kind of, when you're in that space of doing something because you want to appear good towards others or worthy towards others, or maybe you want to prove it to your parents or whoever. You're always wanting acknowledgement. You're wanting people to clap you on the back. You're still externalizing the source of happiness. So when you're really in the space of the true self, it's like a flow state. You're just, like tonight, for instance, if there was a room full of people here or one person, it wouldn't make any difference to me. I'm just happy to be here chatting to Rob, right? So because I'm doing what I like, I'm doing what I enjoy. So we're not so attached to outcome. It's just it just feels like a natural space to be. But maybe the flow state's probably a good way to put it. Where whatever you're doing doesn't seem to require energy. It's that feeling of time just goes, time flies. You go, oh wow, a whole hour went past and I've been doing this. Wow, it feels like 5 minutes. Yeah. It's one of those annoying things where if you go looking for it, it doesn't happen. But yeah, it's I find if someone has the courage to face their dark side, chances are they're going to find their true self if they've got that courage, if they're willing to. It's almost like a process of surrender, just being open to it and going, yeah, what have I got to lose except a whole bunch of shame and guilt, really? Was that helpful?
Yeah, very.
There's a guy, his name will come back to me soon, Master Shri. And I was on, I think, Instagram or something the other day, and I don't know, just going through whatever was in my mind. And then I bumped into this one, Master Sri Akashana, there you go, or Eric Ho back in the day now, Master Sri Akashana. And what it was a reminder to let go, right? So you have this idea, you have this goal, you have this mission. These are the things that I want to achieve. These are the milestones to tell me that I've achieved these things that I set out to do. But part of it is like, the human condition is like, why isn't it happening yet? Where is it? Should have shut up by now. Why haven't I got 20 grand in my bank account? Whatever it might be, right? Whatever these things you're going for. And what it was this set it and forget it. So when you were saying about being in your true self, which is like a flow state, it reminded me of that because, when you're in that state, these things are no longer around you. Yeah. You're just doing what you do, or it is doing what it does, right? Yeah. And I find it really interesting because in many ways, I think as human beings, we almost need direction. Yeah. And as you said, flow state is one, set it and forget it is another. Or it's a case of saying, look, once you've said it, don't think about it anymore. Just do what comes up, be in that state and do what comes up. Yeah. So with those sorts of prompts for human beings, like what comes up for you, do you need to use those sort of prompts in the work that you do, or does it unravel and just show itself and they become that?
I get really motivated by pain. So if I need to find extra motivation, I'll go onto a Facebook group where the people I'm working with are hanging out and being openly expressing the pain that they feel. And I might put a post there, and I suppose it's very much being in the healing space. And I also don't think being in the healing space is necessarily for everyone, right? And that maybe this kind of work, if I was to put a number on it, might only appeal to, say, 20% of the population. It's not for everyone. I think, if we talk about past lives and things, I'm sure plenty of people might go through this life and never actually find their true self, and it might take many lives before they do. But if you trust yourself or you trust that pain, then the pain really informs the mission. And so for me to get motivated, I go back to the pain that's being experienced by others, and that just triggers something in me. It's a natural desire to heal. Yeah.
Great tip.
Yeah.
Great tip. So what we'll do now, unless someone has a question that's come up, looking, scanning the room. So the way we do this is in around 2 or 3 minutes time. Maybe just have a think of something which maybe you haven't said already, or something that comes back. Might be reiterating something, or it might be something completely new from a different direction. And then what we do is that we hear from you in about 2 or 3 minutes, and then we finish a show like that.
Yeah.
Right? So you've
Cool.
got 2 or 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for the heads up.
You're welcome. So for those of you watching here, remember every Monday 6:30 at Tropical Nomad, and it's free to be in the audience. Feel free to join us. It's kind of fun. You get to ask questions and connect with people afterwards. And so this is number 206, I think, from memory. We're no signs of stopping. What do you say before? Not obsession.
Oh, it's a transition from where your occupation becomes a preoccupation.
Occupation becomes a preoccupation. I love that one. I'm gonna have to rewind this when I get home to remember it again. So what it is that so we have like SpeakuP Clubhouse tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. Bali time, which in the US is really for the US market. The US, it is 4 o'clock on the West Coast, that's PST, and 7 o'clock on the East Coast, which is EST, all right? So tomorrow we have J.B. Owen. Now, J.B. Owen is a phenomenally successful, powerful woman, right? She's, I think, a 17 times best-selling author. 17! Come on! Share the love around, JB. 17 times best-selling author. And she created Ignite Publishing. And Ignite Publishing is, I think, it's the biggest publisher in the world for women's empowerment books. Basically, she's like a phenomenal person. So I'll be interviewing her tomorrow at 8 a.m. and that's Clubhouse. So just check my feed, meaning Robert E. and Bonnick, or SpeakuP Monday. You'll find all the details there just to tune in and be part of that amazing conversation. And then on Wednesday, we have another replay, which I think is, it's listed on the website. Which he's an amazing guy, actually, doing some incredible work here for men.
Oh,
right?
great.
Yeah, which I think is a nice little mix.
Yeah.
So then, as you know, before we get to Janet, you've got about 1 more minute left. So next week we're back. Bhavna Parihar will have a beautiful guest to interview. That will be next Monday here, 6:30 at Tropical Nomad. Thanks to Itchy, Bella, who's not here, but Guzman is, and Ayub is. So thank you guys for making us look so great and providing these technical resources, which I could never do by myself.
No.
The last time I was on like a phone with like Instagram Live and it kept cutting out and like the picture's kind of moving as my hand moved.
And you're not even a baby boomer.
Oh,
imagine what it's like for us.
It wasn't looking good to want it. So we filmed the last 107 episodes here at Tropical Nomad. So it's I love Itchy and the team, my brothers. So, and just to finally wrap this up. So I'm the tourism architect. So what that means is that I work with tourism boards and tourism-related businesses who are either in Bali or moving to Bali, creating very tailored business solutions. So reach out to me if that feels like you either want to move to Bali or you're here in Bali, especially in hospitality, but not solely that business. There's like 30 different industries that I connect with over the period of like the last 35 years at a very high level. So we have a lot of strategic partnerships we can draw upon to create these very specific solutions. And why? Because Bali here, mass tourism market has gone. We are now in this age of contribution tourism, what I call contribution tourism, which is about how can we contribute to each other and the best of Bali and the resources here. So we're talking tech tourism, medical health, and a bunch of others, So I've spoken about them a lot, so I won't go into too much detail on that, but you have the details. So Janet Hogan, it's taken us about, I think, 3 years to get to this point of interviewing you.
Yeah, it has.
Roughly around like that. I just want to thank you for being, this incredible person that you are and being able to communicate it in such a way we understand. Because a lot of people, they do some incredible work, but they aren't able to convey it in a way that we can understand, that we can pick up, be inspired by, and really kind of grab it by the horns and say, you know what? I think I want to do that. Or, you know what, I want to look a bit deeper into that. And that's janethogan.com.
Yeah, janethogan.com. Very simple.
Very simple. We like that. So over you, darling, to see us out.
Yeah, I think that, thank you for that, because I thought, I can't think of anything that I could talk about. And of course, something came up. So I run these groups where we look at the dark side, and we have a WhatsApp group attached to that. And it was interesting, last module, everyone met their shadow selves for the first time. And what was really interesting, just looking at the comments in the WhatsApp group, was they said, we love meeting everyone's shadow. It was so much fun. It was just a really, I suppose, a psychologically nerdy moment for me. But it just made me go, isn't that funny? The thing that we're so scared of that keeps us stuck is the very thing that liberates us, if only we knew. And the shadow, I have to say, is such a wonderful part of us. All it is our protector. It's just a little bit overprotective. It's a bit like a Jewish mother. It's just a bit too protective. That's all. But it's a beautiful part of us. And when you get to know that, it's almost like you've got to know every part of yourself, including the part that we fear the most. That's where the sense of wholeness comes from, because we go, there never was anything wrong with me. It was just a story I bought into.
Well, Janet Hogan, thank you very much indeed, darling. Round of applause, guys. Yeah.
Yay!